This is 13 ABC Action News at 4 with Tina Williams and Tony Giftis.
Ohio lawmakers are one step closer to getting rid of concealed carry permits.
Currently, Ohioans have to go through training and pass a background check to get a concealed carry license. All of that goes away if the bill gets the governor's signature. 13 ABC's Josh Troop is live with details in our big story today. Josh?
Yeah, Tina, Tony, here is the current application to apply for a concealed carry permit. It's 5 pages long. It asks some basic personal questions. And if you have proof that you have 8 hours of training, turn in this form and pass that background check, you're good to go. But all of this might not be necessary soon. If this permitless carry bill becomes law, as long as you're 21 and older and legally are allowed to have a gun, you can conceal and carry it. There are a couple of similar versions of this bill that have walked through the legislature in Columbus. One passed the Senate late last year and today passed the House without support from Democrats. Republicans say this bill restores the right to bear arms.
Now, do we encourage training with your weapon of choice? Of course we do. Do we trust Ohioans? I know that I do. And I ask for your support in restoring people's constitutional right.
Senators did just sign off on some minor changes made in the House and now send this bill to the governor.
All right, is the governor expected to sign the bill when it goes across his desk?
It is likely that he will, Tony, especially considering that we're in an election year and Second Amendment issues, continue to be key talking points for Republicans. So the governor has not weighed in publicly on this specific bill, but has said in the past that he would support a constitutional carry or permitless carry bill if one did reach his desk, Tony.
Josh, we're right next to Michigan. How many other states have similar laws?
21 states, if you're keeping track at home, have some form of permitless carry right now, including Ohio's neighbors in Kentucky and West Virginia. Efforts are underway to pass similar bills in other states, including Indiana, Alabama, and Georgia. Advocates say it's time for Ohio to get on board here, and opponents, meanwhile, want laws going in the opposite direction.
All right, we'll just wait and see what the governor does next. Thanks very much, Josh Croup, reporting live.
And under Ohio law, county sheriffs are responsible for issuing concealed carry licenses and then renewing them, as well as suspending and revoking those permits. The state attorney general's office compiles all the data, and we're getting a closer look at some of that and looking at some of the trends, okay? The latest numbers show that there were concealed carry permits issued more in 2020 than in years prior. And then look at 2021. There's a slight dip, but only by about 2,000 here. And the report also breaks down where those new permits were issued. Van Wert, Paulding, Defiance counties had some of the fewest. Now, you can also look at license suspensions. Lucas County ranked 9th in the state for suspensions with 47 last year. So let's take a look at some of those trends. The number of regular license denials was 50% higher than the 2020 total, marking a record high for the second consecutive year. Still, all of the regular license decisions made in 2021, the denials only represent 1.3%. And Lucas County had the third highest number of application rejections in the entire state. Meanwhile, the number of licenses renewed was 50% higher than the 2020 total and a record high for the entire program.
Thoughts on the legislation is split. Those in favor welcome the change. And today, we spoke with the head of Buckeye Firearms Association. The grassroots group says that the current concealed carry laws have a bunch of red tape, making it complicated for gun owners to exercise their rights. But as for the argument that it will open up the gates for criminals, here's the response.
That's just nonsense. When you buy a firearm, right now the law specifies you're supposed to go through a background check. You cannot own a gun unless you meet certain requirements. So if you're going to be carrying a gun, you already have to meet all those. If you're a criminal intent on committing criminal acts, you're not going to follow the law. Criminals don't look up in the Ohio Revised Code to see what's legal or illegal. So I think that Ohio gun owners are able to be responsible. They've proven themselves to be responsible for many, many years. And I think that people are going to wake up after this bill is passed and they find that Ohio is exactly the same as it was before, except for those who own guns. Things are a little easier.
The organization says the Senate bill changes will encourage the Second Amendment right to bear arms.
Now, those opposed to the new gun law proposals include Moms Demand Action. The organization is nationwide and has a chapter here in Ohio. Group members argue, quote, gutting permitting requirements will put our communities and the people whose job it is to keep us safe in danger. This bill should go no further. The House must reject permitless carry.
The bill also has mixed support from police. The Ohio chapter of the Fraternal Order of Police says it is against permitless carry, and another part of the legislation that puts the notification of a weapon in a car on officers. But instead of a driver having to disclose they have a weapon, the officer would be required to ask. So there's also the argument that without CCWs, there are no training requirements.
So now people will be able to carry without a background check and without any type of training. And that's one of our biggest concerns of this bill. We like to have everyone have the safety training, know where they can and cannot carry, and what their duties and responsibilities are when they're carrying a firearm. And the background check, you know, we've had thousands of people who've been suspended or revoked or denied licenses. And then that system's not going to be there anymore.
So what does the proposed law do legally speaking? We have attorney Joshua Williams with us. So do you see any holes in making Ohio a permitless state?
Well, there's always this fear that more people are going to be carrying firearms, but what I see is a reduction in those people that are attempting to defend themselves being charged with improper handling and concealed carry here in the state of Ohio. So I actually am a proponent of the law. I think it's a great idea to fall in line with some of our other states that have successfully passed constitutional carry without a real spike in any violent crime.
Okay, as you mentioned, one side argues that you already have to pass a background check to own a gun legally. The other side of the aisle says the concealed carry permit is really a stopgap that could prevent someone who was already a gun owner and then maybe no longer qualifies for that background check getting a concealed carry. Then there's this whole gun show loophole right here in the state of Ohio. You can purchase from a private seller without a background check. So does this level the playing field or make things more complicated?
I don't think it makes it more complicated. The gun show loophole, as it's called, is just a hole in the background check requirement for private sales between two individuals where no background check is required. The important part is when an individual is stopped by law enforcement, this law now makes it where prior you had to disclose if you had a CCW and you were carrying a firearm. That requirement was only for CCW holders. If you were a felon in possession of a firearm, there was no real requirement for you to disclose, so nothing really changes. If you're unlawfully in possession of a firearm in the state of Ohio, this law will not protect you when you come in contact with law enforcement. They are going to ask whether or not you have a firearm on you, and depending on the events that take place, maybe that firearm is discovered and you will be prosecuted for being in unlawful possession of a firearm. What this law does is allows law-abiding citizens that legally can own and possess firearms to merely cover up that firearm with their shirt or article of clothing. Because in Ohio, we have an open carry law allowing a law-abiding citizen that lawfully owns a firearm to carry it openly without a permit. The permit only allows you to conceal it, and it allows you to carry it inside of a vehicle and keep it on your person. That's one of the big areas that it causes a little bit of confusion between the two laws.
Okay, so when we talk about then officers stopping you, if this proposal goes through and is approved, they would need to ask every single person, do you have a firearm in the law? It puts it back on the officers. You don't have to disclose it right away. So could we ever see cases thrown out if an officer fails to ask someone if they have a weapon in a car?
Well, that's a more complicated question than it getting thrown out. It has to be a violation of someone's rights in order to initiate the exclusionary rule. The exclusionary rule is a very finite rule. I teach it at Adrian College where I teach criminal law and criminal procedure. So do I see a case where the case is thrown out merely because the officer doesn't ask whether or not you have a firearm on you before eventually finding out? That mere lapse in judgment of asking whether or not you have a firearm won't be the sole basis to throw out a conviction.
Okay. What about profiling? The Fraternal Order of Police, one of the head people of that organization here in Ohio, not in favor of this, putting it back on the officer, says it could lead to that. So what do you think?
If an officer is trained to ask each and every individual that they come in contact with whether or not they have a firearm on them, then profiling in relation to asking the question is not an issue. The only issue with profiling will be whether or not they profile to initiate that initial contact with the individual. In that instance, that's not on the new law, that's on the officer and the officer's perceptions of certain classes of individuals. So here, if you have uniformity across the board and you ask every single person you come in contact with whether or not they have a firearm, there's no risk of additional profiling.
Well, thank you, Joshua Williams, for being with us today. We really appreciate it.